Thank you for joining our webinar today. We're going to talk about startup sales secrets. The title is also going to be how B2B SaaS founders can use these 3 core principles to build a winning sales strategy in their business. We're going to have a guest today. Next to being still in a sales role at the moment, he gives consultancy to other companies. He's written a book and he actually found time today to join us on this webinar. Thank you, Gavin. Floor is all yours.
Thanks, Joran. Well, everyone, thanks for, if you're watching this webinar, thanks for tuning in. Let's get into it. So today, what we're going to cover is the difference between sales strategy, methodology, and process. And I think that's really key when we talk about developing a winning sales strategy. We'll talk about 5 things that we have backwards when it comes to startup sales that we really must unlearn, or startups really must unlearn to make progress. Then we'll get into the 3 core principles. So the first principle is why becoming an expert in your buyer's decision-making journey is vital for B2B startups. Then we'll talk about how to investigate your target markets and their tiers within those markets as well. And you've probably heard some of this stuff before, but it's a little bit different take on some of the literature and some of the theory that's out there. And also how to use the technology adoption lifecycle to build your sales strategy, and that's key. So really, let's start with who am I? I began selling B2B SaaS in 2015 for an Australian tech company out here in Australia called Redeye. Our average ticket price was $20,000 per month in recurring revenue, and we were typically chasing, 5-year terms, 5-year deals. And as you can imagine, with such high ticket price, any flaw in our process was really highlighted, and it really forced us to think differently and me to think differently about sales. I learned the typical sales processes and methodologies aren't enough to close sales without a strategy. And I learned that over many, many meetings, hundreds and hundreds of meetings, applying the methodologies that are out in the market today and just not getting the outcome that we were hoping for. And it wasn't until we applied the right strategy, then we were able to make consistent, repeatable progress. Selling B2B SaaS online, it was going to need to be approached differently. And that's one of the key things I learned as well. Having the motivation to sell wasn't enough. I needed to figure out how to get my target markets to buy. And we'll talk about that. That's really the core of this presentation today. But what I discovered in my journey is people all over the world, in our personal lives and in our professional, follow the same process to buy something. The mindset journey, the change in our mind to buy something. And once I discovered this, I was able to reduce the length of sale for the business I was working for upwards of 75% for an average deal size of around $2 million in revenue. So they're considerable deals, but we were able to reduce the sales cycle from some instances 3.5 to 4 years down to less than 12 months. And it's by applying some of these principles in this presentation today. So first of all, let's talk about the definitions and we'll talk about strategy. So a strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve long-term or overall aim, to achieve a long-term or overall aim. Now, if we think about it in the military sense, the art of planning or directing overall military operations and movements in a war or battle. So we can actually take many lessons in sales from military scenarios and also in other areas as well. So we might talk a little bit about that today. As a startup, if you're entering a competitive marketplace, you're effectively going to war against existing competitors. And I think that often gets lost in the startup community. We really have to outsmart our competition. Now, methodology. Methodology is defined as a system of methods used in a particular area or study or activity. And that's different to strategy, as you can see. Now, and process, again, is a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. And the sales inside a business has room and needs all three, but often a business is missing the strategy. Now, these are the common mistakes I see in many startups when it comes to sales. Most startups confuse methodology or process with strategy. And I've learned this the hard way. I would follow methodology step by step, collect all the information that I needed to collect in line with the methodologies I was following, and they still weren't taking action. And I didn't have anywhere to go. I ran out of tools in my chest because I was following a methodology and I didn't know where to go from there. So methodology isn't enough. People out there or startups are just doing what everyone else is doing. They're developing a go-to-market strategy or go-to-market plan, or doing a certain amount of calls, or saying, hey, do you want a demo? And it's exactly the same as nearly every other competitor that's in the market. So you're really not differentiating yourself from the sales strategy, and that's from the sales process. And that's one thing a startup must do. They must differentiate themselves and add value from the outset. They don't pay the right amount of attention to developing the right strategy. It surprises me that this isn't paid more attention to. And I can appreciate founders are wearing multiple different hats, how to build the business, how to build the product, how to engage with stakeholders, and sales is one of them. And often it's not their strongest suit. So they're naturally drawn to the other. They're drawing attention to areas that they're stronger in. So founders don't own the strategy. If you're a technical founder, I'm going to assume, or it's not uncommon for founders who are technically minded to think that they don't have any value to add in the sales process. And I'm here to share with you today that is completely false. I think a founder is key to owning the sales strategy within a business. Their technical knowledge about the problem is going to be key to getting those clients to buy what you're offering. And also, the only guarantee within a startup is a founder is going to be there for long periods of time. And startup people may come and go. They may come for 3, 4, 5 years, or they could come for 6. And they really should implement and build the process or the strategy while the founder owns it and has oversight. And most of all, people don't focus on the right strategy. And we'll go through that today.
Yeah, we got a question for the previous slide, because we have startups in multiple phases. Like some don't have a product yet, or they have a product they want to get started. Some already have some couple of clients. Others are a bit further. Like you mentioned, strategy doesn't get enough attention. When should you think about having the right strategy, or at least building a strategy?
I think you should think about it from the outset. Like if you don't have any clients, let's say you have an idea to start building a startup, and you start developing, and you don't have a product to even take to market yet, you should really start engaging with the market. Your strategy, while you're still forming it, would be to engage with as many potential customers as possible, to share what I'm doing, to try to build interest, to build rapport, and to make connections in those target industries or markets that you want to go to. Because the last thing, let's say, for instance, you want to, it may take 6 months for someone to want to buy you. If you take a year to build your product and then you start engaging with the market, it's another 6 months, if not closer to 2 years. That's 2 years. You should be engaging with the market early, and they'll buy into what you're doing and support you and be interested in what you're doing. That could be a strategy at the beginning, because you want to actually make sure you're on the right track, build interest, share that you have domain expertise, and as you go, you can build it out and build that strategy out. No one has a right strategy. The strategy always evolves, and you only need to look at the COVID situation in the last 2 years. The whole way we need to approach things has changed, and I think sales is a practice. I don't think you achieve it, and it's a skill that you have. I think you always need to evolve and iterate. Does that make sense?
Definitely makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So here's a question for everyone. So what is a sale? Joran, what in your mind, what is a sale? What does that mean to you? And what do others say when you think about a sale in a startup?
I mean, when I look at a sale as a founder, it means that somebody buys my product and I get money on the bank account. Like that's for me a sale. I think everybody here will agree on that.
Yeah, look, and the common thing is closing a deal or calling prospects or revenue, right? Or runway, or the success of the business. Really at the end of the day, a sale is in any form is a consequence, and it's a lag indicator of something else happening. And it's really a consequence of someone deciding to buy. Now, when I started in my role at this company called Redeye, we had so much interest in what we were doing. We were clearly a disruptor in the market, but interest never turned into a purchasing decision. We were waiting, and all their words were saying, yes, we're going to buy you, but they just weren't making that purchase. And it doesn't matter how much you want to sell or how much value you think you have. It does not matter until you cannot do anything until someone decides to buy. And that's true for anything, whether it's a $50 pair of jeans or $1 million house. A sale cannot take place until someone decides to buy it. So this whole process of this sales strategy that we're talking about today is, if we can't, selling doesn't work online particularly. So we need to work on, how do we get people to that buying decision? How do we get them to want to buy us? And that's what we need to focus on as startups and differentiate ourselves from the beginning. And once we recognize that, then we can control more of the process, reduce the length of sale because we know the journey they're going to go on, and everything changes from that instance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but and I guess then one question, because I mean, everybody has it, right? As you mentioned, people are going to say they're going to buy it, they're not going to do it. But do you then consider that a sale, or is for you still a sale when somebody actually hit that purchase button?
There's two different types. Yeah, well, a sale only really occurs when you get the PO or you get the contract, right? Anything can derail before that. Even in my day job now, I'm waiting on a $1 million contract. They're saying yes. We've gone through the terms and conditions, and they've all gone. Our legal teams have gone, yes, we're all agreeing it, but we just haven't received that signed contract. So it's still at risk. Okay. But often in a business, what happens in a business is they'll make a purchasing decision well before that day. So you'll know, or they'll make a decision that you may not even be aware of 3, 4, 5 months before. What they'll do is follow business process second. So they'll buy with emotion first, and then they'll follow with business process second. And you need to look out for that. You can see it if you know what you're looking for, but it only counts really when you're on the right track to a sale, but anything can be derailed, and we need to actually have a good defense to know and make sure we cover a lot of those areas of risk. And the Medic book by Andy White is a methodology that says, hey, we need to cross off all these to make sure to increase our chances of sale. It's a methodology and not a strategy, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
right? And that's where we use methodologies to tick those boxes to increase our chances, and we'll go beyond that.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the 5 things that we've all had backwards when it comes to B2B startup sales. So in the early days at a startup salesperson's role is to sell. Now, I think a salesperson's role is one of the hardest inside a business, particularly a startup, to do. You have to go and create a market for the product. You have to go and engage with the market to try to get them to buy. It's really a problem-solving role, and it's not about selling. Sometimes in an early stage startup, the best tool in a sales process is the founder. The founder is so technically minded and has an aura around them that my role in the early days when I was starting is I would set up the sale, and I'd bring the founder in to close it. because he was the technically minded one, and he was the one who always wanted to sign off on the contracts. But that was the problem. My problem into getting them to buy is that he was the best tool in my tool chest to get him to buy. So a salesperson's role isn't to sell, it's a problem-solving role. And there's many problems in the sales process. And a salesperson, founder, whatever hat that is, it's the same that applies. Okay. Now, if businesses aren't hitting the revenue targets, they have a sales problem. I can guarantee, Joran, in your business, if you got 20 new clients signing up for your business tomorrow, you could do that. You would make it work. You would get those 20 customers onboarding. You may have a delivery problem. You don't necessarily have a sales problem, right? Because you could make those sales if you wanted. That's not your issue. If we go back to a sale as a consequence, what you have, or what startups have, is a demand problem. There's not enough demand for the startup, and that's the real issue. Because if you have demand, you can make the sale. Okay. Now, startups must go out and sell to hit the revenue targets. It's no one likes to be sold to, particularly online these days. If you go out and try to sell someone on the first call, they just won't take your call again. That's not what we need startups to do. What we need to do is go out and engage in the market, share our vision, share our journey, and start building relationships. The higher the value SaaS that you have, the more relationships the more you have to spend on building relationships. But you also have to build relationships one way or another to have them continually maintain as a keep using you as a business, right? Sales is purely a numbers game. It is a numbers game once you figure out the strategy and understand. I'm going to swear here, so you beep this out if you want. Have you heard of the saying, shit in, shit out? Like, if you have a very bad process, it doesn't matter whether you're, or strategy, it doesn't matter if you're, it doesn't matter how much you put into it. If you're not capitalizing on understanding how to get them through the journey, it's not the numbers game that won't do it. And that's why you see people doing lead generation. They're going 1%, 2%, 3% reply rates on email cadences because their strategy is not working. They're just trying to smash the top of the funnel and hope some things come out. And the fifth one is, if you build a great B2B SaaS product, customers will automatically buy. And unfortunately, that's just not true. Businesses they are set up to say no to buying things. They just can't go out and buy things left, right, and center. There's been many great SaaS products that just haven't understood how their target clients buy and haven't aligned their process or strategy to helping those clients through those stages that they must go through. You know, we'll talk about this in one of the slides, but businesses sometimes need to create business cases. They need to prove the value. And you could either let them do it or you could help them do it. And if you let them do it, you are flipping a coin and hoping they'll come back to you at the end of it. Or you're hoping that they see the problem in the full context that you offer. And the chances are they don't. So what we actually do is need to help them through that buying journey. And we'll talk about that in the next principle. Before we go on from there, do you have any questions?
I maybe wanted to add one more thing. I wanted to ask a question, but you kind of already said it. But for your quote, shit in, shit out, like, even though if you are able to close the shit in this sense, your retention is gonna be awful, I guess. Because if you are gonna close leads or sales which are not really a good fit, then at one point, like, they are gonna churn, which is bad for your churn rate, which your investors are gonna complain about. So even though you are able to close them, make sure you have like the ideal customer profile set, also talking to CS.
Absolutely. And if you bring on a bad client, you will spend twice the amount or 3 times the amount of revenue they generate in managing that client, and they're just not worth it. One of the things, often salespeople are notorious of not caring what happens after they get the sale. But with SaaS businesses, the sale is just the beginning of the relationship, and you need to deliver. you need to really ask yourself, how do we want the customer to be when they sign that contract? You want them to be super excited, super enthusiastic, and see the value in your business from that contract signing. You go, well, that's a great end state to aim for. Okay, well, what do we need to do all the way back up the chain? And that's another conversation for another day. But I've seen the wrong clients come on board, and they just suck revenue out of and time out of the business. Yeah, that's a great point. So let's talk about principle one. So my observation in seeing a lot of the literature online is, the problem with the literature is it's really good. They say understand the buying journey. But when you think about the buying journey in relation to a SaaS product, is they're typically talking about what's their journey, how they interact with us on our business, how do they interact on our website? When they go to the landing page, do they go to the product page? Do they go to a sales funnel? How do they interact with our pages, or how do they interact with our company? And it's kind of true, but it's missing a really critical part. Now, in being expert in your buyer's journey, it goes one step further and really understanding the buyer's mindset and how to get them to a buying decision quicker. So because a sale is a consequence of someone deciding to buy, how your clients get to a purchasing decision and how fast they get to a purchasing decision is everything. And we need to do everything in our power to maximize our value in their eyes from the outset and make them need us, right? And make them need us, open their eyes to problems that they didn't know they were aware of. And that's where a technical founder's expertise comes into. They should know the problem space. After all, they've started a business based around it. So regardless of the geography, culture, age, or gender, we all go through a similar mindset change in the way we want to purchase something. Though how we make those purchases may differ depending on the circumstance. And we'll cover that a little bit. So it's similar. It's a similar path of a $50 purchase to $1 million purchase. We must see value for our money to make the purchase. Even for a $50 pair of jeans, if you think they're only worth $10 from a bargain shop, you are not going to spend $50 on a $10 pair of jeans, right? But you'll spend $50 on a pair of jeans that is probably fashionable and it looks like they're worth $300 or $400. You'll say, I can see the value and I'll purchase. And the same as $1 million purchase. You need to be seeing a return on investment, however you measure that, or value for that purchase. Now, with a $50 purchase, this is more subconscious, but as you get a high ticket price, it's what comes more into your conscious mind. But it's pretty much the same. It's the same journey we all go on. Now, and also because businesses are made up of people, they go through the same journey as well. And this is roughly the journey we go on. So let's just say in your situation, Joran, you wanted to buy a house, right? So you're interested in buying a house. These are interchangeable slightly. So your problem is, well, what do I want? Do I want to live near the water? Do I have a big family? Or you've got your dog? I know you've got that rescue dog and your partner. So you probably don't need a 5-bedroom house, right? So you ask yourself what you have, what's your budget, what's the problem that I have? Well, I want to buy a house. And then you ask yourself, I've got, my girlfriend and my dog. I only need a 2-bedroom apartment, maybe 3-bedroom apartment. I don't want a yard, although I need somewhere close to a park for the dog. Okay, now I'll go look at real estate companies to look at houses, and then I'll engage with a real estate agent, then I'll purchase. It's the same when you have, I need a new pair of jeans. Well, okay, well, what's the problem? Well, they're ripped. Okay, well, I'm interested in this brand. Well, what do I need? I've only got a budget of $150, blah, 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 blah. I'll have a look online or go look in the shops. I'll engage with the salesperson, then I'll purchase. It's the same. It's the same with a business. If we have a human resources problem where our payroll is not working properly. Okay, well, what's the actual problem? Well, it's doing this. Okay, well, what do we need to solve it? Okay, I'll engage with the market, then I'll purchase. We all do the same thing, right? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I have one question, because you have specifically here a $50 purchase is the same as a $1 million purchase. I mean, I understand that they follow the same flow, but in the end, you have a lot more stakeholders, right? If you want to get a new HR system, it's not buying a pair of jeans. Like, how do you, I guess, see this differently? Like, where are those extra stakeholders in this path?
Yeah, so we'll get to that in the next one, in the next principle. But people need to, one thing we need to recognize is they need to see value, right? They need to see value in their purchase, right? And one of the difficulties with SaaS businesses is they're often intangible. You can't touch a SaaS business. It's not like a car. You know, a car will get you from A to B. It's not like a product. They're often web pages and apps, mostly. Like, they could be hybrids of other things. But so they're often a solution. So and we'll get to that in a second. So, but what they need to see is the value. And one of the biggest mistakes B2B startups make is they assume that their clients know the problem, right? So they assume the client knows the problem, but they engage with a client up in this stage and say, hey, we've got a solution that fits these requirements, but they haven't actually taken into consideration that the client may not even understand the problem in their business, and they will never go forward because they don't have the context. Does that make sense? And we'll go, yeah. So, and we'll get into looking at the multiple buyers in the next slide, in the next one, next principle. So, if we know their journey that they need to go on, if they need to see value to make a purchase, then we can then maximize the value we offer. And because people must equate a value to a purchase, and particularly with SaaS revenue, what I think the numbers are, they need to see a 10x to 20x return before they'll make a purchase decision. 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, 3-to-1 is simply not enough. Well, like what I mentioned before, is one of the challenges is for B2B startups is they only demonstrate solutions, and that's understandable. They're building a solution to solve a problem. The founder of the startup or the startup has already gone through that problem journey. They're at the solution stage. But if we think about a sale as a journey of the buyer's not there yet. They're still at the problem stage. Does that make sense?
Definitely makes sense, yeah.
So here's to give you some context. Now, let me show, I'm not particularly interested in cars, but this car, I said, yeah, look, it looks pretty good. Like that looks like it's been looked after, but I have no context to where it come from. So I don't know if this is valuable or not. But if I show you how it was before they started working on it, then I'm like, holy cow, that is such a huge improvement, right? And a startup is essentially the shiny car, and they're coming in and fixing a broken process within a business. That's all a B2B SaaS business is. It's a process improvement inside a business, right? But if they're only talking in solutions, how can they show or demonstrate an ROI of the value if they're not focusing on how broken their current problem is, or how bad the current problem is within a business?
Yeah, and that's also what you mentioned, make them need us, as in creating urgency to actually get them to buy a product, right?
Yep. A startup's biggest competitor is not the existing competition, it's indecision. So many times I've been in, particularly when I was selling high value SaaS, right? Like, they weren't paying for a product, they were using Dropbox or a file share system. Why would they want to spend $1 million, $2 million on something they're not spending money on? The only way to get them to move from that is to show them how bad their current problem was. Like, when I would do it, I would build that problem out into a $1 million a month problem by direct and indirect cost. And they were like, I cannot stay in that state anymore. I have to move towards a solution. So we have to create movement. And when there's movement from one state to another, then there's opportunity. Without that movement, without that need to move, then a business has no opportunity. It's really, people just don't see that there's a problem, and they won't pay to solve something if it's not a problem.
Really good advice.
So so this is how we move. Let's move on to principle 2 now. So principle 2 is we really need to know your target markets and tiers. So this is a diagram I created just to break down. People all understand your target markets. I'll talk about revenue generated per industry, all those kind of things, but everybody does that. So what we really need to understand is what are the factors that will affect us to make a sale or consistently make sales in that industry. So every market is different, and so are the drivers in that market. So, and every market has a different tier. So if we talk about tier 1 being what you mentioned before, large organization, government organization, water, power, utility, you think of a tier 1 like that. Tier 2 may be a mid-tier organization, and a tier 3 is a maybe a subcontractor or an owner operator or something like that within a market. And every businesses have tiers within the markets as well. So you may, as a B2B startup, enter a department inside a larger organization that may be considered a tier 3 in a business. We can break this down even further. The decision-making processes are less complex, but as you go up in the organization, it gets more complex, which we'll go through in a second. So as you go through the tiers, as you can see here, this arrow on the bottom, their buying process complexity changes. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're a B2B startup and you're only selling to one person, it's really B2B, but it's still a consumer. It's a consumer type of sale. One person can make the sale. They can quickly make a decision. And you would expect that to have the total addressable market would be much larger. And there'd be far more competitors in that industry as well. But you would also, the time to win a deal would be low, and then you would expect the revenue to be low as well. I'm just skipping through here a little bit. But in those tier 3s, you would expect the features and outcomes, the organization or the person in that tier 3 would be lower as well. If you think of tier 1, a tier 1 organization is going to require ISO 27001 certification. It's going to require regular pen testing. It's going to require far more stringency on your process and your features and outcomes in your business than what a tier 3 would ask, if that's an easy comparison to make. So you would also expect that time to win a deal would get longer as you go through the tiers. Now, the real reason that a deal goes longer is because they have to go through different stages in a business. In a tier 3, a person may make the buying decision when you speak to. They may able to make that purchase decision because it's a lower ticket offer. At tier 2, you may be speaking to a manager who has to go to the owner or has to justify the cost a little more. They have to making sure they get a return on an investment. And then when you go to tier 1, if you went to a tier 1 business and you say, hey, I want to spend $1 million, the COO or the operations manager, their responsibility is to say, no, we are not going to spend that money until I have a demonstrable ROI and a business case built around the benefits that we will get from that product. If I'm going to spend $1 million, I want to see a $10 million return or a $10 million de-risk in the business. And that's why the process takes longer, because the gates they need to move through is longer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think you now touch back on what you said before, as in if it's $1 million purchase, then it needs to do 10x. So you need to already get that problem out there at the beginning.
Yeah, and you need to focus. The higher the ticket price, the more you need to focus on the problem. To be honest, it takes you really need to, because they're going to do a competitive scan. They have to do a competitive scan of the industry. So you need to, if you don't help them, someone else will, and then you'll be at a disadvantage also. And as you go through the tiers as well, the total addressable market decreases. So you need the revenue to be higher in these higher tiers because they don't come up very often. The length of sale is longer. They're going to require more features. So you really need to understand where you're best suited. So, and also the competitors decrease as you go across, but they get more sophisticated and they get bigger, like the SAPs of the world only play in this space, right? Or the Autodesk of the world and things like that. So you really need to understand B2B startup, they go, a common mindset is, hey, we'll just go and we'll sell to a big company and we'll be set. We'll be a $1 billion unicorn. And it's often those competitors do everything in their power to stop you from being successful in those tiers. And it's like a war. They don't want you to be successful because you are stopping them being successful. Okay. So what we need to understand as a startup, what you need to understand as a startup is, where do you have a competitive advantage? We really need to understand where our feature set, or where your current feature set or the outcomes that you provide through your features can create a competitive advantage in the tier or the market that you want to enter. So you need to understand where you have an advantage over your competitors. And there's nothing worse, and I've done it before, is I've created a state where the client has to move away from the current state, and they've gone straight past our business to a competitor because I thought it was natural they were going to come to us. And what I did is I basically created an opportunity for a competitor. So you need to understand, once you do an assessment of the markets you're in, you need to ask yourself, are you engaging in the right tier? And are there drivers in the markets that in the market tiers you can capitalize on? Currently in Australia, and in my role in the day job, I sell workforce compliance software. The Australian government passed an act called the Critical Infrastructure Act Amendment. So it means there's over 1,000 large clients who operate critical infrastructure have to implement a workforce compliance or have to monitor critical staff and suppliers in their supply chain. So this will be there's an unprecedented movement from their current state to a new state that our software has the ability to help them on. So I'm tying all my efforts into the drivers in that market to help them from their current state to a new proposed state. But I've only done that because I'm investigating the markets, and it's really only affecting the upper tier 2s and tier 1s of the industries that we operate. So ask yourself, are there drivers in the market, like, low emissions or the low emission, or the global warming or electric car industry? They're drivers in industry that startups could potentially capitalize on to drive people to a solution like theirs. And entering at the right point of the market can increase your sales success as well. And it can help increasing more sales often to build out strategy and process. And as you get one client, we learn, take the learnings from them and build out our strategy to apply to tomorrow's client, and so on and so on. And over time, we'll add all the pieces to the strategy, and it'll start forming over time. Now, what I want to do is give you an example here. So this is a potential market where a startup may have a competitive advantage in the upper part of tier 3 or just into tier 2. But if they're engaging here in the market in tier 1s and going, hey, we're going to close all these tier 1 clients, but they don't have the features or the functionality that they want, but their competitive advantage is actually down here, then they actually won't win clients. And that's why we need to understand the tiers, the buying process complexity, what they want in those markets, and engage where we can deliver those outcomes that those markets expect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. There was going to be one question, like, how do you find, I guess, in which tier you're going to enter the market? You kind of already answered that by looking at the features you have and what the tiers are looking for, right?
Yeah, and remember before when you asked, what do you do when you don't have a sales strategy? And one of the things I said is we need to engage with the market. You need to speak to as many people as you can and share what you're doing and what your vision is and your roadmap and how things will be. And if you do it right, the market will tell you if they're interested or not. Like, you can come up with this theory, but you need to go out and actually speak to the market. And that's why what we need to do is engage with the market, have conversations, share our vision. And if you do it right, in the next principle, we'll talk about the innovators. Those innovators will present themselves and say, yes, I'm interested in this. And knowing that, and you go, okay, well, that's interesting. I seem to have traction at this type of organization. Can I duplicate that? Okay, well, that's the tier that I should enter. If that, so it all kind of, all these tie in together. These principles, they all are interrelated. And what I want to do is I want to talk about a case study. This is a case study when I worked at Red Eye, which is an Australian engineering drawing management company, and PlanGrid is a engineering drawing management company based out of the US. So PlanGrid was founded in 2011. It first started with a simple mobile app platform, and the functionality afforded them to enter tier 3, the tier 3 market. So they were actually selling to plumbers, builders, domestic builders to help them manage their engineering drawing plans on site, where before they were using paper. So it was a simple feature set that suited that market. So they can engage the market and get to revenue quicker. And then they entered different tiers as they developed functionality and their reputation evolved. They moved up the tiers, like what I was talking about before. So if we just go back to this tier before, they knew their competitive advantage was here. Their feature set was here. Their total addressable market was high, but also so was their competitors. But what they did is they entered that market. And as they actually developed features, then they moved into different tiers. So they started in 2011, and in 2018, they were acquired by Autodesk for $875 million. And now, at my time of leaving Red Eye, they were starting to lap into the tier 1 organizations over here in Australia. So they were moving up the tiers. Now I want to give you the contrast of Red Eye. So Red Eye was founded in 2012. The founder decided to only develop enterprise software, or B2B enterprise software. And he was really only interested in tier 1 organizations. And he afforded revenue. He afforded years of revenue before he could even get something that was close to what a tier 1 organization wanted. It was always an incomplete product. So, and they still haven't pivoted into other tiers, from what I understand, since I've left that business, where their functionality is more suited. So as a result, PlanGrid is now in the tiers and taking market share from that business. And Red Eye has been forced to pivot into other products like bushfire software and things like that, because they're not getting the traction. And that and their revenue is a fraction of what PlanGrid revenue is. So this is another example. I'll just go back to this slide before. Is the reason I brought this up is Red Eye's strategy was to engage in the market in tier 1s, and where their real competitive advantage was in it was really down here, was somewhere in this area here. Now, the reason why the founder should own the strategy is because at the end of the day, the founder owned the strategy and we stuck to tier 1s. I had to do what I was told in that instance. But then again, that afforded me to figure out how to help tier 1s buy with an incomplete product as well. So there were advantages of doing that over time, but they certainly didn't capitalize on the market like the opportunity like PlanGrid did, because they entered the market in a where their functionality was suited and grew as their business evolved.
Yeah, what would be your ideal situation? Like PlanGrid, trying with a small product, talking to clients, then move your way up? Or, I mean, I think you already answered it. Red Eye still not figuring things out or not closing the deals they want to. So I guess like the PlanGrid situation would be for you the most ideal situation to get started.
Well, I guess you have to ask what is the goal of a startup? What's the goal of the business? Is the business to only enter into a tier 1, or is the goal of the business of a startup is to help as many organizations that have the problems we solve in the most efficient way possible, right? Like, I think when I said before is we can take many lessons from nature. And one of the things with and I've done this mistake in sales is when I started in sales, I would only go for large clients, but the true mix of how you should have clients. You should have a certain amount of large ones, then a subset of mid-tier ones, and a larger set of smaller ones. And if you think about how lions or animals hunt in Africa, they don't always go for big animals. They go for them sometimes, but they supplement their diet with big animal, mostly medium animals, and a lot of smaller animals, right? Like, I think it's a more stable way to approach the market. Like, you learn from the smaller ones, and then you take those learnings, and when you build out your strategies, which we'll go through it in the next slide, is you use those smaller clients or those tier threes to build out that problem and the tools to demonstrate the problem and the case studies. And then when you're ready, you will go through the technology adoption curve and go into those larger organizations as well. So, but if you're a startup and you can withstand, if your goal is to not generate revenue and wait till you get to tier ones, then hey, that's your goal. Like it's, at the end of the day, it was the founder's goal at Red Eye to do that, and it was his prerogative. But I see that I would see most founders want to create $1 billion unicorn, right? And the best way to do it is get to revenue quicker and grow and scale as you get bigger. Yeah,
makes sense.
So this is the principle 3 is using the technology adoption curve or life cycle, which we've all seen out there. There's a lot of literature, and to build your sales strategy. So one of the things, if we talk about the journey that a client needs to go on in their mind or to make a purchasing decision, the more, as you move through the market, the more proof people need of the problem. And this is why there's only a small subset of innovators. And then you use that data, which we'll get into in a second, to go through to the other markets. Now, by narrowing our focus and criteria, it increases our chances of success. So we've looked at the tier, the tiers. We understand we need to go out and engage with different people in different tiers to see the interest. Now, what we need to do is narrow our focus even further to increase our chances of a sale. So we need to find clients who are already on that buying journey. So they're already experiencing the problem, and they're already may not be looking for a solution, or they're looking for a solution, just haven't found the right one yet, because they can see everyone else hasn't been solving, hasn't solved the problem. So we need to find them, and it's only by engaging with them and sharing our journey and what we're going on, or what a startup's going on, well, they will let you know if they're them or not. If you can create your messaging right and your value proposition right, they will naturally self-select and let you know they're there. But you can only do that by engaging with the market. So these innovators, they're already living in the problem. They know the solution, and they'll know the solution as soon as you see it. They'll see it in a light bulb moment. And I'm sure there's founders out there of B2B startups who will watch this that go, yes, that's exactly what I need, I'll buy. But then, would be a mistake to base your whole sales process on, hey, we're a disruptor in the market. Now, I'll give you an example. At Red Eye, we were doing a lot of client meetings and things like that. The governor of Nevada was actually doing a tour around Australia. We went and we showed them what we were doing at Red Eye, and they said, we've had that problem for a long period of time, we'll buy you. And that's how we got into the US. We didn't actually sell anything. They were an innovator sitting in the problem for 2 or 3 years, and they were looking for a solution, and we showed them, and they went, yes, that would do it, we'll purchase. And I've even said to them, we didn't actually sell anything to you, you actually saw us and bought us. And he was like, yeah, you're right. And they were an innovator, but they just were experiencing the problem. A good example of this would be, Joran, I would imagine that you are not interested at all, or you and I, both of us, are not interested in heart stents. We have no interest in it. We're skeptics. We don't care about heart stents, and heart stents are used for people with a heart attack to open up their arteries, right? If you had a heart attack tomorrow, if I had a heart attack tomorrow, and it was it was going to save my life, I'd be an innovator within a day. I would be I'd be keen to do, you wouldn't have to prove it to me because I already have the problem. And I know that's an extreme example, but people can move along these curves by how much they see the problem in their business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess like at the beginning, you said like you need to get the messaging right. And with that, of course, you mean talking about the problem, making sure that people actually understand that they have the problem, and then they're going to find for the solution which you're going to offer.
Correct. So you bring up a really good point. Founders talk about their business from a founder's perspective. I'm developing this software, it solves this problem, or we're doing these features and things like that. But think about it from the market's perspective. They only care about what they get, and we need to position our messaging in that way. So if you go to a hardware store, ask yourself, like, if you go to a hardware store and you buy a drill, do you really want the drill, or do you want the hole the drill will give you, right? So the people want the hole, they don't want the drill. So if people can get away without buying you, they will. If they think they can solve the problem without using you, they will. And we have to always think like that. So our value proposition is understanding what value we really offer, and then framing our messaging around that, and in the terms of what makes sense for the buyer. Because remember, it's the buyer's journey that buyer's mindset journey we need to focus on. And that's the whole strategy that we're formulating, is helping our buyer move from, I don't know who you are, to I really, really need you in my business. And that's not a binary journey. It's a series of steps along the way. Okay. And innovators can make purchase decisions quicker, typically, but they also can be of low value because it's under a budgetary cap or something like that, or they're experiencing it. Or in our case with Nevada, it was a large purchasing decision, and we just got to the right people at the right time. Now, the value of innovators and early adopters. So let's go back to this image that we were showing earlier. So early clients can help you start building content for your sales strategy. You can work with them to develop tools. So let's just say you enter a large mining company into a certain department, you can work with those people in the business to demonstrate how the value you offer. And one of the ways you need to do that is create tools to help them measure their current state of the problem they solve. And we really need to work on those direct costs and indirect costs, and they can be qualitative or quantitative depending on what, and a combination of both. If you do it right, and you need to do it right, and you use those early innovators because they know it really well, and they're creating those tools for their business, and then you should be able to capitalize on those skills. And that's where a founder's knowledge is critical to help round out those problems within their business. And then you can use the tools to expand in their business as possible, but also the tools can be repurposed and used in the sales process to help organizations along their journey faster. Now, the best example I have of this is I followed a client for 2 years. I chased them. It was a water company here in Australia, and they wrote a tender for us. And they were like, "Yep, you're the preferred." I knew I'd done a lot of work up front, and by the time we got the tender, it was all written in our language. And I was like, "We're a shoo-in. We're 100%." And it was my coming of age as a SaaS salesperson, but we lost it. We lost it on the procurement because they couldn't buy from a startup and whatever the reason was. But I took those set of requirements, turned them generic, so I could reuse them. And every time a prospective client was said, "Yes, we're about to go through a procurement process to purchase, we'll definitely invite you." Compiling those requirements would have taken 3 or 4 months. What I did is I said, "Hey, I've got a set of requirements that may shave off a couple of months of your journey. Can I share it with you and use what you want, discard what you want, and then it will help you along your sales process?" It took about 6 months once I started doing that for them to come back, but our win rate went from like 5% in tenders to like 45% in tenders because we were helping them and we were repurposing content. And so we could tell when they wanted to purchase us because they weren't changing any of the words. They were just using it word for word. And we were outsmarting the competition that were Fortune 500 companies. So, and that helped build out the strategy. Right.
That's really, really clever. And in the end, you're going to help them to save time, give them value by giving them requirements. So you help, it's a win-win in a way that they get.
Yeah, correct. And it builds a law of reciprocity. It shortens the sales cycle. You can never ask a business to speed up, really. You can't often ask a business to speed up a purchasing decision. What you can do is remove the speed humps and roadblocks that they will come up against to say, hey, you're about to go on a requirements exercise. You're going to interview all these people. Let me give you a template just to shave off a couple of months. And they'll go, oh, that's really generous of you. Thank you very much. And they look at it and go, yeah, we need this functionality. And it works 100% of the time. And you get this exponential value. So I turned that one loss, which was, I think from memory, $35,000 a month. It was a big deal on a 60-month term, but I turned that into about 20 wins. It was an exponential value, even on a loss. So, and that's how we leverage the early adopters and innovators to gain other companies and cross that chasm into the early majority.
Nice, I like it.
So this doesn't automatically happen. People don't automatically buy. We have to work at it, and we need to be deliberate in our approach, but it actually is easier than you think as well. But it has to be a deliberate process, and that's why the founder needs to own the process, because this can take a couple of, you'll get traction reasonably quickly and you'll start seeing indicators that you're on the right track. But it really takes a consistent effort over time, a couple of years, to really build out an effective sales strategy. And that's why you need to walk before you can run. So I guess where to from here? So start today by developing your sales strategy and focus on the buyer. How do you want the buyer to be when they purchase you, and work backwards? Like, they have to make a decision to buy, and they have to see you as the only choice to help them in their business. So if that's the only choice, you have to help them on that journey, because it's fraught with competitors or indecision. So the only way to get them to that choice is to lead them through their buying journey. And so unpacking that is the strategy that is the only winning strategy that I've seen in startups where they repeat repeatable sales. You focus on getting your clients to a buying decision and needing you in their business. Take lessons from other industries, and even nature, as I mentioned, is a great teacher. We see in other industries, like the real estate industry or the car sales, they're well-proven industries, and there's different approaches according to the tiers that companies are engaging with, because the buying complexity changes. We can see in the real estate industry, domestic real estate or residential real estate is a very different buying process than high-rise or industrial real estate, because the buying complexity changes and the sophistication of tier one buyers in that industry changes. So they have to change their process. And I think B2B SaaS is still a relatively young industry. It's still in large enterprise, it's less than 8 years old, and most businesses had no cloud policies. So it's still an industry in its infancy, and we'll see over time how this will play out. And again, you need to walk before you can run. There is no shame in taking a lot longer to do a client and then slowly speeding up and going, hey, what can I repurpose? What did we learn out of this process? What information or what tools or business cases did we get from a client that can we take, repurpose, and share with our clients tomorrow to speed them up on that journey? And do we get the same outcome? And it's just having that, don't be afraid to fail fast and have an iterative approach. Then you'll be surprised at how quick you make progress in the strategy. And again, don't be afraid to fail fast, and be aware. Sometimes you'll make a mistake 6 months, or you'll choose to ignore something in the beginning of a sales journey, and it'll actually come back to bite you 6 months down the track. So we need to be ever aware of what's going on so we can not make those same mistakes again. Your skills as a founder is critical to sales success. You can't outsource the strategy to your sales team. You have to be a fundamental component to it because your skill set is vital. Now you can download my book. We'll send out a link to Startup Sales Secrets, and it has a more in-depth look at these principles as well. And you know, I can't implore you to start looking at this strategy and applying it within your business. I also have a limited availability for coaching and things like that. That's not the purpose of the call today, but you can reach out through Joran or myself, and we can discuss that or have a chat about your current sales challenges and see if I can point you in the right direction as well. And I guess that's it for today. Do you have is there any questions there? Right.
Well, maybe let me ask one before I jump into questions from everybody. Like, where can people find you? Where can they get in contact with you? Yeah,
so you can see at the bottom of my presentation there, I can be found at salesmarketfit.co. You can reach out, and there's a contact button there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Gavin Tye. They're the most common places. I've got a YouTube channel as well under Gavin Tye, where I'm releasing sales content regularly as well.
Yeah. One question: is there a framework people can fill out, use to really get started with a sales strategy? Like, is there something you would recommend besides, I guess, like using these 3 core principles?
I do. There is a sales framework that I've created. It's really called Finding Your Sales Market Fit. Like, a lot of companies spend a lot of time on product market fit, but they're not actually changing their sales process to the markets that they want to enter. And they need to find that sales market fit framework. So there is a framework. The principles will actually, the core principles will help you on that way. But I do have some information on that, and that's kind of in that, you know, that coaching realm as well. But yeah, there is a framework that people can start adding to.
Good. Then definitely a good time to get in contact with Gavin. For the people, as mentioned, like watching this live or watching this afterwards, who subscribe, will send the link to get the book. I guess my final question is, can we also add the link to the book for the people who are not watching this live and watching this probably on our blog when we're going to put it on there?
Yeah. We can put the link. Yep. There'll be a link. Just jump on the page and then you can get the download. Yep. It'll be no drama.
Good. Would be somewhere down here, or everybody does it over here, right? We're gonna put the link in the blog, and then you can get the book from there.
Yep. No worries. Thank you for today. If I was going to leave you with one final thought, it's just start. Even though you don't know where the end's going to be, starting the sales, like a sales strategy, is important, because if you have plans to move geographies or different countries, if you can't figure out how to get your clients to buy with you in the region that you're in, it's very difficult to get that to happen in another geography. Work backwards, or in every meeting, go, what's the best outcome that I'm shooting for here? Like, how do I get them to the next step? What am I going to shoot for? And what would I look for? How would they react to certain information? And how do I know I'm on the right track? And it's small iterative steps that make up a sales process or a strategy that get you to a win. And it's like golf. You'd never win it on the first hole, but you can lose it. So sales is like a game of golf. It's a lot of hits to a good score.
That's a good metaphor. Thank you. And it's and this is why, like, we're heavy with Reddit also on building a sales process, as in, like, you can't have other people do sales for you. What affiliate marketing basically is, if you haven't figured out yourself. So this has been really valuable for everybody who's going to watch this, because they can really get the sales running themselves, and then afterwards expand to basically have other people try to sell for them.
You've hit the nail on the head there. Like, I've seen startups who have struggled to figure out how to sell their business, and they try to outsource it through a partnership program. and they're just outsourcing the problem. They haven't solved it. And if the founder can't do it, then the partnership company or the partners will find it too difficult, and they won't get the success. So it's imperative that you learn how to do this to get the maximum benefit from a partnership program and referral program like you guys at Redditus.
100% agreed. Thank you very much for today, Gavin, on behalf of myself and everybody else.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Let me